Hi, my name is Natalie Parkerson. I'm also known as Savantis, the celebrity psychic, and I own Tarotti.com. I want to thank you for joining me as I discuss how Tarotti came to be. People often ask me, how did you become a psychic? Are people born with this gift? Do we acquire it at some point in our lives? And where does it begin? I don't know the exact details of that, but I do know that I did in fact possess this ability early in childhood. I also know that both my mother and grandmother had the gift of clairvoyance. And while skeptics often look to debunk the notion that clairvoyance and intuition are entirely natural, inherent instincts, traits, and even supernatural gifts, how can anyone argue and debate known facts where you have a man or a woman, let's say, for example, sitting at their kitchen table, perhaps reading the newspaper, and therein they have a vision relevant to the article they're reading, then phone the police to inform them where the body of a missing person can be found, and or accurately and with great detail describe the perpetrator behind the crime when they have no connection to the person or persons involved and live perhaps 2,000, 5,000 miles away. And later their information turns out to be 100% accurate. You cannot debate that. I was 22 years old. I mean, you certainly can, by the way, but I don't see how you can present a formidable argument when clearly the facts are someone in point A knew nothing of someone in point B, and out of nowhere they have a vision and they see what happened, how it happened, and perhaps who did it. So it's inexplicable. But I was 22 years old when I recognized that I was clairvoyant, and yet still wasn't mature enough to realize the potential involved or even how to harness it and utilize the ability to help others. For me, it was dreams that often came true, and the intuition I rarely paid attention to. I began to better understand my gift probably around the age of 41 back in 2002 while I was living in Ohio. I woke up one morning and my first thought was a hospital medevac helicopter is going to crash. That was it. No other thought. Therefore, I couldn't do anything about it since I had no idea where or when until later that afternoon upon watching the news. So earlier that morning, around 12:24 a.m., a helicopter en route to pick up a patient did in fact crash and explode in the hospital courtyard at Cleveland Clinic Hospital, where 2 people were killed. So I can only equate this ability to a person learning to play an instrument. Initially, nothing really makes sense. They're not actually playing a song, but learning scales, keys, and chord progressions until one day they bring it all together and they're making music. So in 2012, while beginning my career as a Christian behavioral treatment specialist and psychotherapist, I took notice of what appeared to be the rise of a new trend, online psychic readings. 4 things came to mind upon seeing the banner ads for online psychic readings. A, I'm a Christian, a theological seminary school graduate, a psychotherapist, and I'm clairvoyant. So I thought to myself, hey, this would be a great hobby, something I can do in my spare time and still make some money and help other people, and I'd be good at it. When I pray, I always pray for ideas. And one of my seminary school teachers taught us to do that. He said that it's one of the most overlooked things we normally ask for during prayer. So I woke up one morning after having prayed for ideas, and my first thought was to apply at one of those online companies that offer psychic readings. I had no idea how to present myself, where to begin, or what any of the services entailed, but I did know I wanted to try it. So I Googled online psychic jobs, and one of the top companies in the field was first in the search listing, and that's where I applied. I filled out their online application, and within 30 minutes, I received a phone call from their staff manager. She introduced herself and told me that the next step involved was proving to her that I'm actually clairvoyant. And I did that, and I was hired that day, and I began working there the following day, and I'd say within 2 weeks' time, I was one of their top psychics. This was a pay-per-minute company, which I'd never really heard of, and back then, the cost was $8 per minute to speak to me. And that was far more than anything I made, even as a psychotherapist or behavioral psychologist. So that's $480 an hour. So while my intent was to answer the client's questions as soon as possible, the company had a very different agenda. All the phone calls were recorded. So once I completed a call, I'd often receive a call back from the owner of the company or the manager, where they'd immediately begin to play the recording of my last call in order to teach me how to keep the client on the phone much longer. So the manager would say, I'm going to teach you how to be a great storyteller because you want to become a great storyteller. You want to tell them to buy candles, and they can get candles of a certain color because you're going to give them homework because people love homework. And this is, of course, the manager explaining to me how to keep these people on the phone longer, and that I needed to tell them to place crystals under their pillows and perform these various chants and tell the client that I'm going to teach them to become a love magnet, and then the manager would teach me how to teach them to become a love magnet. Yeah. And then I needed to tell them about their beautiful aura and the color of their aura, and go into the various colors with the colorful descriptions and so forth. So the manager would play out part of the dialogue between the client and myself, then stop the recording here to demonstrate what I could have said or should have said in order to keep the client engaged and on the phone. I'm listening to this, and I'm just thinking, this is almost teeters on criminal. This is just vile and despicable, but I'm listening, and she's the boss, So now today, the price at this company is $13 per minute, and I've seen it as high, if you can fathom this, other companies, $19 a minute, $25 a minute. But I think I've put a dent in a lot of that since the inception of Tarotti, because I've gone to bat for the women who call these companies, in spite of themselves, essentially debunking them. And yeah. So for $780 per hour, which is $13 a minute, I no longer care if Harold, George, or Tom is coming back to me. Okay, I want to know where the body is buried, who did it, and where the police can find them. Perhaps even Kim Jong-un's next plot against the United States, and where the next terrorist might be positioning himself. That's what I want to know at $780 a minute. But unfortunately, you're not going to find anything more than a pep talk and a very good story, and something that might temporarily make you feel much better, contrary to any truth of any sort. So I had countless young women on welfare with 2 or 3 children, or people receiving Social Security disability, or senior citizens, people barely surviving on the meager income they received each month, calling to ask how their life will improve, at $8 a minute. So, I'm thinking a prayer. I just, this is, what do we have here? We're already at $16, and I haven't formulated my first thought. So I had clients who had lost their job and couldn't find work, calling to ask what, if anything, was in store for them, all the while frantic and terrified as to how they're going to make their rent or their mortgage. And the companies want me to delude these people into believing that their miracle was right around the corner and offer up some nonsensical chant or spell or chakra nonsense, encouraging them to go buy candles and while keeping them on the phone, hoping that they lose all track of time, while I dwindle away the minutes as the company rapes their bank account. It was vicious, and I don't think it was anything short of evil. And these companies also would send out these newsletters that were supposedly prepared by the psychics themselves. So, a customer might get an email that says, "Hey, Cervantes here, and I'm here to tell you that September is going to be a phenomenal month for you. Absolutely spectacular. I've been reading your chart and reading about your life, and I can see here that September 19th, there's a solid chance you're going to win the lottery." So these people would then call me, or they would call into the company and want to be directed to Cervantes to find out what I saw about their life. And I'd get them on the phone, and I'd say, "Hi, this is Cervantes," and they'd say, "Well, this is Margaret, and I got your email that said I'm going to win the lottery and September's going to be a great month." Well, I never wrote that email. No psychic working for the company wrote any of those emails. It was just, some clerk at the desk that's doing its marketing. And I would, as a clairvoyant, I would see that September's essentially going to be a month like any other month. So, now what do I tell you? But of course, according to the company, they want me to elaborate and, of course, paint some fabulous picture here for the client. And it was just horrific and inhumane, really, just utterly and completely inhumane. So, a good psychic seemed to be defined by how good of a story they could tell over and above what is really going to happen or is actually happening. So as I began to ask myself, what am I doing here? This is disgusting, and I can't be a part of this nor associated with it. I suddenly thought of my dad when he was in the Army, and he was in Special Forces. He was a Green Beret, and they sent him on a very dangerous mission to Russia. He had to enter Russia, dressed as a civilian, so he grew his hair long, grew a beard, and his job, however, was to rescue scientists wanting to defect. So I began to realize I was there to learn the horrors of the latest online trend, a serious addiction that was taking women by storm. And it was a heroin of sorts, an emotional drug that was putting scores of women in dire financial straits while leading them away from any kind of truth, away from developing a deeper relationship with the Lord, while creating a shallow, irrational, unreasonable, illogical, difficult, and very angry people. I had a woman who was married to a doctor, and he left her, and she was $80,000 in debt, calling psychics at the company I worked for, being told over and over that they would reconcile and reunite. And I realized very quickly into our conversations that this man was never going to reconcile with her, and that for the most part, I could see that he'd left her. She was severely mentally ill, and the children had left her. But the bottom line was, now she's got the new psychic in front of her, Cervantes here, and she wants to know what I have to say. And what a mess. What a mess, right? So I quit the Paper Minute Company after establishing 2 years of employment with them. Initially, I assumed it would be great to combine my gift of clairvoyance with counseling as a professional psychotherapist. But first, I needed a name for my company. And the moment I gave it any thought, the word Tarotti came to mind almost instantaneously, as if it truly were whispered to me by the Lord himself, and which might seem like blasphemy to most Christians, or many of them. Tarotti. I believe God in his infinite wisdom, he knew exactly what he was doing. So with all of the millions of domain names out there already registered, it's almost hard to, come up with anything new. To my shock, Tarotti.com was available, and I bought it immediately. And next, I had to build a website, and I did, and everything else followed. So it was extremely difficult to find people who were genuinely gifted with clairvoyance and to work for me. And once I was able to find a few, I then had to make sure they were also responsible, trustworthy, dependable, knowledgeable, and savvy enough to handle the client's money and not fall back on any bogus lies merely to appease the client's hopes and desires for their perfect outcome. And of course, keep up with the appointments. So finding professional psychics capable of performing all the duties that needed to be handled was also going to be a very difficult task, I came to find out, because the pay-per-minute companies, you just plug in your phone and the phone rings. And with me, you had the money when the client paid, the money went into their the PayPal account of the psychic who worked for me, and they had to get back to the client right away, or within a reasonable period of time, and say, here I am, and I've received your payment, and thank you very much, and it's I want to get you scheduled. And so to get people who are actually motivated and ambitious and could handle something like their own little business, because they're all independent contractors, that was going to be a needle in a haystack. And so there I was. So in the first 2 weeks of Tarotti's grand opening, I received a letter stating that Tarotti had received negative reviews on the internet, but for $500, I could have those negative reviews expunged. Yes, removed entirely for $500. So I was immediately alarmed, and I followed the link that led me to the negative reviews. So there I found a negative reviews. One of them said that Tarotti had exorbitant prices, and that I had told the client their love interest would soon return, but he hadn't, and that I had racked up thousands of dollars from this heartbroken client. Well, it was painfully obvious that the company who wrote to inform me that they could remove the negative reviews was in fact the same person who wrote the negative review. So, because I had only been in business for 2 weeks, and I was the only psychic available at that time, and my fee was an exorbitant price of $35 per hour. And also, if somebody was in crisis or they didn't feel that they were still over Sam, and I couldn't leave anyone crying and sobbing and devastated. So, there I would be 2 hours on the phone, $35, and so for me to have racked up thousands of dollars from one client was, excuse me, I dropped my microphone, was virtually impossible. And it was then that I learned that I can't trust the review boards. Really, nobody should. So I learned that counseling combined with clairvoyance with clients doesn't work either. Most of the clients had one agenda, and that was a quick fix to a far more complex problem. People in the throes of heartache do not want to know how to cope if their love interest isn't returning. They're in agony, and they're used to the lies and tales and fables of the pay-per-minute storytellers. So when I come along or came along and gave them the truth in conjunction with ideas of how they could better cope with the loss of Bob or Joe, just all hell broke loose. Like I was a foreign language to them. What do you mean? Bob is. All the other psychics said that Bob was coming. Yeah, he's not coming back. So I was the voice of reason in a very unreasonable situation, and with people who have been literally brainwashed. And I had my work cut out for me. So the best I can equate the situation is they came for a drug, and that drug was a lie, and I was selling the truth, and the clients left feeling robbed and misled, and painfully grief-stricken, where they didn't get that quick fix like they had at all the other places. So, they were mad at me. But fact of the matter is, I think sometimes we want to be lied to, perhaps. But I could not be the heroine of a fix that they needed. They had to, they had to come to terms with reality and learn the ways in which they could cope. But not every story ended with a no or a negative. There were several very positive outcomes, and but I mean, readings can go anywhere. I had a young girl. Oh, she's probably 22 years old at the time, and a very sweet voice. She just called to ask if she was going to be a nurse, and I'm thinking, first, when somebody calls to ask, am I ever going to be a nurse or a fireman? I don't know. Are you? People will call to ask questions that they themselves can answer. I wouldn't need anyone's permission. I wouldn't need to go to any psychic to ask them, hey, listen, I really want to be a gardener, and do you think, am I going to be one? Well, I decide that. If I want to be a gardener, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do whatever it takes to be a gardener or a lawyer or a baker, who knows. But anyway, she wanted to know. So in the course of just talking to her, and I love this whole pay-per-minute thing is just, it's garbage. I'm not going to, we got to talk. If you want a professional psychic reading and you're going through a situation that's life and death. I mean, your career is life and death. Are you and your husband of 20 years going to get back together again? We got to talk about things. And anyway, this young gal, she was in nursing school, and she's asking how she would do on this test or that test. And I told her, I told her that one she would fail and the next she would pass. And of course, I was right. But as we're doing this reading, I'm sort of reading ahead of her in my mind, looking at next year. I don't know why, but I was, and she didn't know I was. And I saw that she would die. And I thought, oh my God, she's not going to make it as a nurse because she's not going to live to see it. And when I saw what I saw, of course I'm thinking, I'm just trying to engage her in casual pleasantries while I'm reading on something unbeknownst to her, and I saw that she would take her own life. Okay, so I'm thinking, how do you go from reading on how well this young lady's going to do in nursing school to trying to figure out how's she going to die? How can I stop this train wreck? And I said to her, let's say her name is Luann. I'm making that up, but Luann, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. It's a little off the beaten path here, but have you ever tried to commit suicide? Have there been any suicide attempts with you? And everything went silent, and there was a bit of a gasp, as I recall. And then I thought I heard her perhaps whimpering, or as if she were going to start crying. And this, she sort of squeaked out a yes, and with a trembling voice, and I said, okay, and I'm thinking in my head, well, what are we going to do here? Because she's going to be successful at that next year. And then I asked her, what about the surrounding circumstances. So when you have somebody like that at a pay-per-minute, how do you say, listen, you just continue to pay $8 or $13 a minute here while I try to figure out how we're going to stop you from committing suicide next year, or even entertaining it any longer? What is the root cause? Why is this what's taking place in your life here? In any event, she went on to tell me that she had been facilitated twice on 2 different suicide attempts, and that she's suffered from clinical depression, and then she went on to discuss some surrounding circumstances. So at that point, I then said to her, listen, anytime you need to call me, you're not to pay 1 dime. And then she just went on. I took her on as for counseling, and she accepted that. So that's how I operate. And but a lot of times, you know, the clients don't want to hear any counseling. I think it's really an insult to tell them that that's my trade. That Tarotti is really a hobby, and I'm not going to be I'm not going to compromise my values and my standards. And people either if they really want to know what's going to happen, they can call me, or if they want to just feel good for the day, and they can pay a lot of money for a lie. But that's how Tarotti got its start, and I am very proud to own Tarotti, and this has been all of 7 years ago, and Tarotti's doing remarkably well. And I do believe it was a gift from the Lord. And I want to thank you for joining me, and appreciate the time you've invested to hear my story. Thank you very much.